You've been lied to. When it comes to intermittent fasting, we're going to bust all those myths today.
Yep. Well, what are the myths first? Where are we going to get started? So I think we should get started with what it is, right? What is intermittent fasting?
Well,
And
it seems like if people think it's a fad, but well, tell us a little more about that because it is not.
well, no, that's a great place to start. Is intermittent fasting a diet fad? Right? That's the question. Let me ask a different question. Is the way we eat today a fad? If you look at human history, I would say eating whenever you want, whatever you want, multiple times a day is very new, and that's the fad.
That's going to, because there used to be 3 square meals a day, and what was that based on?
Right. Well, okay, so the word breakfast, what does that, it's an old English word, and it means breaking your
Fast.
daily. So it's clear that we've been fasting as a species for quite some time. So fasting is probably less of a fad than not fasting.
Well, let's even go back even further. Food was never really a fad. It used to be what you did to live, right?
Right.
So back in the caveman days and paleo days, whatever those days were, you found food, you ate it, you didn't have a refrigerator,
Yeah.
and the fast was not a fad. It was because you just didn't eat until you had food again.
Right. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not a hunter-gatherer, and, I'm... So, all right, let's just go back, I don't know, 4,000 years and just go with biblical times. There is no great book of religion that exists, whether we're talking about the Indian religions or the Christian religion or Muslim religion, Jewish religions. Every one of them include fasting as part of their...
Well, you think of the even in the Bible, there were sojourners. They would travel. Most of the people in the Bible were, if you know Israel and you know the land, right? It comes from the water, and then there's all this grass and plain where they would travel, and they would bring their sheep and they would graze when the weather was right. But there was times during the year where they didn't have that, where it got
Right.
cold. So there was always rotation to food. And food wasn't as prevalent. And think about it, there was no refrigerators. There was the
No
timing
pantries.
of how you ate had to do with the availability of the food at the time, the seasons. There was no food store, so you couldn't get frozen foods, right? So put yourself back into most of human history had to do with some sort of fasting, not intentionally.
Right. And then if we look at it, again, from a physiology standpoint, and we say, all right, what are the evolutionary pressures that make us human, genetically who we are today? Well, it was the availability of food depending on where you lived. And we can pretty much say that the abundance we have today never existed. The ability to walk into a supermarket 24 hours a day and very cheaply purchase as many calories as you want. Anything that's ever been called food on planet Earth ever is immediately available to us all the time. So that's the fad. That's new. And we can argue that health problems that people are concerned about is more related to overabundance than it is lack.
Right.
Okay. All right. So with, again, framing the argument is very important. And so then we say, all right, well, then what about the word intermittent fasting? So I think words matter. And I think clinically, again, we're both doctors where we work with patients. I actually use fasting strategies as a protocol for helping patients resolve health issues.
Which I think is going to be super interesting for this conversation. I use fasting personally. I found it to be one of the best tools I ever found. But how you use it in clinic and how you use it, you rotate it through with people is very interesting. So I'm looking forward to hearing your perspective on that.
Yeah, of course. And again, understanding where we come from as humans is probably really, really important part of this conversation. But when it comes to what do I do, what are my concerns, I think you have a bunch of questions for me. I think we both have great answers on how to fast. And again, going back to the terminology, clinically, we say fasting is usually over 24 hours. Time restriction is what we do in a 24-hour period. So I always say either time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting. They're both valuable, and there's reasons to do both. But a greater than 24-hour fast, so think about a 1-day fast, 3-day fast, 5 or 7, or even some people do 40-day fasts. There's reasons to do these things, but you should understand what's happening in your body.
So I know that I can ask you these questions forever. That's why I come here. And I bring my own questions because I get FaceTime with you to ask these questions because I'm applying it in my life. So, and I also know that you're probably one of the most qualified people probably in the world, because not only do you understand and use the research, but you're using it practically and you're using it clinically, and you have real-time evidence, case studies that you can talk about. So we can go on forever.
For sure.
And we will. Like, this is probably a core topic as far as meal timing and how it impacts the body and how it is for every individual person. So it's not one size fits all.
So before we get started, let me give you a little bit of my personal history on this. So as a clinician, I've been, I specialized, I graduated from school in 1996. I immediately jumped into a 3-year postgraduate neurology program. After working with very varying brain-based disorders, I pretty much settled on sports concussion. And back in 2010, I was working with the Carrick Institute, and we were working with professional athletes suffering from post-concussion syndrome. And what we found was there were so many ways in which we can engage the nervous system to retrain it, balance and training and eye movements and all of these things. But what we learned really quickly, and this is 2010, 11, the word autophagy was really coming into its own, and I think the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded on autophagy in that time period. And autophagy, and we'll get into what that even means.
I was about to say, you better explain that before we move on.
But we found that what we did was, we didn't know why we were doing this, but what we did was we took these athletes who were suffering from CTE or chronic traumatic encephalopathy, right, or post-concussion syndrome, and we were fasting them for 7 days, nothing but water. The results we saw was remarkable.
So autophagy, meaning when you get to a time in your fasting cycle where your body starts to, in my understanding, just dump toxins. Is that what's happening? And
well, I'll say break down proteins.
Oh, okay.
Get rid of and the word protein is super important because that's a big question people have. What about protein? I don't want to lose muscle.
One of our questions. Well, I'll tell you what. Today we're going to hammer home 2 questions that we're going to ask. I want to get back to the autophagy, but we are going to talk about, will it slow down people's metabolism, and will it cause muscle wasting because you're not having all protein throughout most of your 24-hour cycle. So before we get into those 2 questions, please break down the autophagy piece, because that is really what we're one of the things we're looking for to get a benefit of while we're doing this, that growth hormone, things of that nature, which I'm sure we're going to cover today, but autophagy in particular.
Yeah, so your body will go through 300 grams of protein per day. So now don't listen to that soundbite and say, I got to eat 300 grams of protein a day. No. You're going to break down 300 grams of protein, and you're going to recycle about 230 grams of that for the average adult. So now we're looking at a deficit of about, let's say, 70 grams. And then you have to ask the question, well, okay, if I'm breaking down protein, what does that even mean? Well, there's a lot, your body is made of pretty much fat and protein. And we have, I purchased my house. My house was built in the 1960s. And, it was a nice house. There was like some Brady Bunch paneling. There was like some green tubs and some
heart-shaped hot tub.
Yeah. Shag carpets.
In the bathroom.
So let's imagine the house is your body, well built for the 1960s. And, you got to tear up that carpet. You got to put down hardwood floors. You got to remove that green tub and replace it with a nice clawfoot tub. So you have to break down the old before you can add the new, right? You don't just take a clawfoot tub and plop it on top of the old green one. You have to break it down. So your body does the same thing. And we know this with bone health, right? In the physio, and don't be scared of big words that we're going to use, but
it's like demo day on HGTV.
Yeah, so a lot of women are concerned about osteoporosis, their bones getting weak and brittle. And a lot of the medications that are used for osteoporosis have to do with interfering with how we break down bone and how we rebuild it. So osteoclastic activity, bone breakdown, versus osteoblastic activity, bone building. You can't build bone until you take down the old. So you have to break it down. So you're going to take that collagen protein, you're going to break it down, recycle it, and make new bone that's stronger and healthier. So when you think about protein in your body, it exists in different places. There's connective tissue, there's skin, there's muscle, there's bone, there are enzymes and things floating in your blood, there's your immune system. So there are a lot of proteins in your body. And yes, we do break them down. And there's while we're fasting, there's a mechanism where everybody knows, the research shows, growth hormone can increase fivefold on a 3 to 5 day fast.
Before we get to the growth hormone, so when you're saying as the protein breaks down, are you basically saying that it also has to get eliminated from the body? So
Yeah.
What are we doing with the broken down protein?
Going to the and again going back to the brain-based cases, right? The chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So we know that brain-based or post-concussion syndrome, there are a lot of proteins associated with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's where there are these proteins floating around in the brain. Just think about your brain has a lot of garbage bags. The trash needs to be taken out. You can assemble the trash, but if it stays in the cell, you can imagine all these garbage bags filled with old proteins just sitting inside the cell. Somebody's got to take the garbage out.
Right.
And fasting is a great way for your body to eliminate these old proteins so that you can replace them with new proteins, right? So your brain functions better. You want to make sure that the cells have a fresh set of proteins in order to function normally, because old proteins don't function well. The old stove from 1965 may have been top of the line in 1965, but in 2025, it's not working very well.
So what you're saying, so let me ask you a question. So what you're saying is that at some point after I stop eating my last meal, whether it's through a 24-hour period of time, or we might call intermittent, where we're going to call meal timing, or longer fasts, when autophagy kicks in, we're basically getting rid of cellular debris,
protein debris.
So it's
correct.
a detoxing effect. So,
Right.
because this is what I noticed myself. This is practically now. I don't use it in practice like you do yet. I'm using it just personally for years. I found that it really kind of corrects a lot of things I might mess up. So even if my meals might be so great during my feeding time, I just feel like that period of time kind of is a way to kind of course correct what's going on in my system, and it's a great way to kind of keep myself balanced and get rid of something that
I mean, look, we could go down rabbit holes about hormones like growth hormone and insulin and adrenaline and all cortisol, and we will. We're going to touch on these because they're related to the concerns that people have, but we want to avoid going too deep. Unless you want to go deep, we will.
Well, I have two main questions that keep coming up, and I have a list of a couple we're going to do rapid fire.
Yeah, so why don't we?
So I've been getting a lot of questions from our viewers, and thank you very much. So this one in particular has come up a lot, especially when it comes to fasting, and I can kind of relate to it. If you're not eating, so say for example you have an intermittent fasting would be like, for example, stop eating at 8 o'clock at night, don't eat again until 1 o'clock the next day, right? So if you don't eat from 8 o'clock at night till 1 o'clock the next day, I was always under the impression that you ate every couple hours because that's what keeps putting wood on the fire. It keeps your metabolism going. If I stop eating, wouldn't that be the opposite? If I don't eat for 16 hours, am I bringing my metabolism to a halt?
So we know that rapid weight loss, one of the biggest concerns we have about rapid weight loss is slowing down in the metabolism, because your body's going to sense, well, I'm getting fewer calories, so I have to adapt.
People used to starve themselves, right? Remember, high school girls would say, or they would starve themselves, or they would eat and throw it up. They wouldn't bring calories in their body, halting their metabolism.
Right. So the old adage of eat multiple small healthy meals a day and calorie restrict to lose weight, it actually works, right? So let's just say, again, for round numbers' sake, you're eating 2,500 calories a day. That's causing you to gain weight, right? and you're now 20 pounds over 20 pounds overweight, and you'd like to see that improve. So what do? You calorie restrict. Let's say you go down to 2,000 calories a day, and you do it. You're eating less, but you're eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe a couple of snacks in between. So now your body senses a reduction in calories. You will lose weight. This is the biggest loser phenomenon, where when you eat less, exercise more, it works until it doesn't. 99% of people who use that strategy, eat less, exercise more, gain all of their weight back within a certain period of time. So we know that to be true. The mechanism is, okay, if I'm 250 pounds and I eat 2,500 calories a day, and I go down to 2,000 calories a day, I will drop to, let's say, 225. I'll lose 25 pounds. And, thumbs up, good job. But now the amount of calories that I need to maintain my weight is now 2,000 calories a day instead of 2,500. I'm down to 225, but my goal was 200.
Right.
I got to lose another 25 pounds. So what am I going to do? I have to calorie restrict further.
More.
And then maybe you go down to, again, for round numbers' sake, 1,500 calories a day. And you lose some more weight, but you never really hit the goal. And then finally you hit your goal on, 1,000 calories a day. And again, your body will use the energy it has. This is the most important thing. It will use the energy it has. So let's just say the 1,000 calories a day is in the form of breakfast, lunch, dinner, and maybe a snack in between. You're just eating less. Everything works well because you're becoming a little bit more sensitive to the hormone insulin, and chances are you became overweight by becoming insulin resistant. Right. So what is insulin? Insulin is a hormone that helps us store energy so that we can use it when we don't have food available, but we never don't have food available. All right. We store energy two ways. We store sugar in our muscles and our liver, and we can only store about 2,000 calories. Well, that's one day. So then how do we store additional? Just in case we find ourselves hunting and gathering and having a hard time finding food, we store extra energy as fat. And fat you can store an unlimited amount, so to speak, meaning hundreds of thousands of calories can be stored as fat, whereas only 2,000 calories can be stored as sugar. Okay. Insulin is a hormone, whether it be in low amounts or high amounts. And if you're insulin resistant, most people who want to lose weight are to some degree insulin resistant. Now what happens is the insulin being released multiple times a day, even if it's in better quantities, prevent you from unlocking fat. It prevents what they call lipolysis, breaking down fat. Therefore, the energy you use is based on the energy you receive, and that's your food. So your body is going to adapt to what it gets. So you'll slow your metabolic rate down. This is where intermittent fasting is so important, because what we always say is, if you're going to fast, fast. But if you're going to eat well. Right? Because when you're eating, you want to make sure you have, especially when it comes to healthy proteins and fats, enough resources to rebuild the protein that you're breaking down, and not so much muscle, by the way, and we'll get to that. But at the same time, you don't want to eat so many times a day that insulin keeps getting released, because that's just going to lock away the fat.
So hold on. I just heard something. So you're saying by eating regularly, you're having regular insulin spikes, which those insulin spikes are keeping the fat from being released and stored and used as energy. So you're keeping your fat stores. You're keeping all of your fat because it's for a rainy day or you need it. And in the meantime, you're telling your body that you have enough food coming in every couple hours that you'll never have to use your fat stores.
Correct.
Is that what I heard?
Correct.
Interesting.
You're telling your body, don't use what's locked away, use what's being given to you.
All right, from that perspective, that would be eating multiple times a day, like we all did, in the 80s. I always go back to the 80s and our bodybuilding days, where it started we ate all the time. We woke up in the middle of the night and ate. I didn't, but that being said, so now explain how the fasting maybe taps into the fat. What's the fasting doing for us that type of eating is not?
So we know that the body, again, it can't exist in two different states at one time. So we all understand the idea of fight or flight, resting, digesting. You're either in one or the other. So when you're eating, you're resting, digesting, you're rebuilding, you're taking the food you're eating, you're either using it for energy immediately because you're active, or you're going to store it for later. Once you fill up your 2,000 calories of sugar in your muscles and in your liver, then you have to divert any excess into body fat. All right, so now the opposite of that is fasting. So now the hormone that stores away the food or the energy, think of food as energy. Insulin goes down because you're not eating. Therefore, why release it? Well, what are the opposite hormones? Well, the opposite hormones can be cortisol, adrenaline or norepinephrine, and growth hormone, and these hormones will then try to take what's available and put it into the blood as energy. So if you're not eating, it's not your food that's providing the energy, it's what's stored in your liver, which you go through real quick. It's only 400 calories in your liver, and your body fat. So lowering your insulin opens the door to your fat cells to dump the fat into your bloodstream to use for energy. Once your brain says, holy cow, I have what could be millions of calories available in body fat, why should I even be hungry?
Wow.
Why should I even be hungry? Look at all this energy. So this is why everyone who does intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating experiences initial hunger, but magically the hunger goes away. How does it go away? It goes away because the body's like, oh, look at all this fat I'm releasing into the bloodstream. Let me use that. I'm not worried. So the brain calms down, and it will use that energy.
Super interesting. So the concept of like now all of a sudden you're empty on gas and that like your body's going to slow down isn't true, because then what happens is it actually goes to the storage that it has and starts to use that as energy. And that energy in the system keeps the metabolism going. And we already talked about autophagy happening at the same time. So now you're getting your release of your own body's natural energy to lose, as well as any toxins in the fat. Because our adipose tissue also stores toxins. So are we also releasing that as well?
All right. So that's important too, because there are toxins in our environment that are fat soluble. And we can use body fat to store that. We know that with medications and drugs. Actually, people who lose weight pretty fast, a lot of the medications that they take kick back into the system and have an effect. And I think I initially heard this back in the day when it came to like recreational drugs that people would take, and
LSD or something. Right. Just hanging out at church and all.
So I don't know how true all that stuff is. I don't worry about that because
I've never had that experience.
But yes, there are some toxins stored in fat that we could release, and that's a good thing because your liver and your kidneys will take care of that and remove it in your digestive system. We have organs of detoxification. And if you're a healthy person, again, this all goes to how metabolically healthy are you? So a lot of the influencers online, they, especially the ones with the 12 packs, the ones that, they're like 26 years old and do things the way I do them because I'm 26 and look at me, I have a 12 pack. Well, I'm sorry, but not when I was 26, but when I was like 18 to 22, I could get off of a night of drinking alcohol, lots of it, go to the diner at 4 o'clock in the morning, eat 5,000 calories in the diner.
I know I can say that order is in any state. Tail ham, egg and cheese on a hard roll, and a cheeseburger and a cheeseburger deluxe
with fries and gravy. And then go to the beach the next day, take my shirt off, and not be embarrassed. Well, if I tried that today, I would be highly embarrassed. So you're the way you just be careful of who you're listening to, because those young people are metabolically very healthy. And a lot of the people who are trying to solve health problems or lose weight or, try to improve their longevity, they don't have that youthful genetics anymore, and they don't have that metabolic rate that makes doing things, a certain way,
And
not so
like
bad.
we always say, what got you healthy in your first 50 years is
Right.
not going to get you healthy in the next 50 years.
So if you're metabolically unhealthy, meaning if you've been experiencing an overabundance of energy, meaning food, and you're resistant to the hormones that store that food, insulin, we call it insulin resistance. It's what leads to things like prediabetes. It's what leads to things like diabetes or heart disease. Well, somebody who's insulin sensitive, what we call isocaloric, meaning they're in calorie balance. There are just people who burn 2,000 calories a day and eat 2,000 calories a day. They never gain weight. They never lose weight. They don't need to do either. And those aren't the people who I think are interested in what we're saying.
I don't know any of those people.
Yeah.
That's not me.
The people who are interested in what we're saying are people trying to solve problems. So if you're insulin resistant, so just imagine this. When you were 20 years old and you ate an apple, let's say you released this much insulin. And now you're insulin resistant at 55 years old. Well, you eat that same apple and you release this much insulin. It's more because you're more resistant to it. So what we want to do is use fasting as a mechanism to restore our sensitivity to these important hormones. Okay? Because you can start to see wild swings in the
Gotcha.
hormones. All right, so let's try not to get too complicated. You mentioned metabolic rate. Fasting speeds up your metabolic rate.
Which is counterintuitive,
Right.
which I love counterintuitiveness because we're busting myths here.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, I've seen that result. I just didn't know what was really going on there. Thanks for breaking that down for us. So, and what so let's move on. I don't want to go too deep into there because we're going to be hitting this home. I think we probably should create a lot of content on this type of
Absolutely.
intermittent fasting.
And we'll make
fasting
that
training.
available. I think this conversation is kind of like the 101 definitions, strategies, what things mean, what some of the myths are. Yes, if you
And how to
want
apply it in your life to get the results.
if you want to do a deeper dive, again, we'll make that available, and we'll make those links available.
So question number 2 for today. All right. So the second one is how do you not waste tissue if you're not eating protein? So for example, myself and many people out there maybe prescribe to the same thing where we ate every 2 or 3 hours. Okay, but as athletes and as bodybuilders back in the day, you had to have a certain amount of protein. And if you didn't get that protein throughout your day, you would lose body, or you wouldn't maximize what you were doing. So if I'm not eating protein, if I'm only eating for 8 hours a day, or even 7 hours a day, or even less, and I'm not eating, how am I not muscle wasting by not keeping that protein level up?
Yeah, so we mentioned protein earlier. It's not just muscle, it's bone, it's skin, it's connective tissue, etc. It's waste products. There's a lot of things that make up protein in the body. Again, just think about physiology for a second. The body has 2 ways to store energy. Sugar, in the form of glycogen, we've said 2,000 calories can be stored, and fat. That's how we store energy. Why in the world would we then immediately, because there are influencers out there who call themselves doctors, who say within the first 2 hours of waking up, you better eat protein because you're going to start tearing your muscle down? That is the equivalent of storing a whole bunch of firewood outside your house, and then when you need it to heat your house, you start tearing up your dining room table and throwing it into the fireplace and not using the firewood you loaded up
So
outside.
interesting you said that, because when I do my research, when I look on the internet, like I'm sure most people do, there are protocols specifically created for athletes, bodybuilders, that seems that they're not doing the typical fasting. They're adding protein. Are they doing that to appease some research? Are they getting a benefit, or is it just some weird modification?
Again, I'll say that bodybuilding research is not based on health. I think a bodybuilder who's on competition day is probably the unhealthiest that they've been in quite some time. So I wouldn't use bodybuilders as a rationale for your health.
Well, but just as far as protein and maximizing protein and healing.
Okay, hold on. So when we're talking about muscle, there's protein we eat and protein we waste. So when you're losing weight, well, there's a lot of proteins you have to break down, right? If you lose weight unnaturally, like bariatric surgery, where you bypass your stomach or something like this. You've seen these people lose 100 pounds. They have all this extra skin. But when you lose weight the right way, through mechanisms that we're talking about here, you're actually taking that extra skin and breaking it down. That's the protein we break down. Your skin, your connective tissue, your byproducts, your protein waste, not muscle. Because again, from an evolutionary standpoint, you're out there hunting and gathering. Again, we're genetically no different than our hunter-gatherer ancestors. That's who we are genetically. If they are not finding food, let's just say it's February, somewhere in northern Ontario, and it's freezing. There's no food on trees. There's no food on the ground. There's nothing but a squirrel, an elk, and every kind of animal in between. So you take down an elk, you eat for a couple of days, you're doing great, and then some time goes by. I'm looking for that other elk. Maybe I'll take down a squirrel here and there, but you're looking for that other elk. Well, if you're fasting, and that, let's just say a week goes by, 10 days.
I start eating my friends about that.
So then the question is, all right, so when I'm hungry, I'm lethargic, I get a headache, I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I can't think straight. Would that type of experience make you more likely to catch an elk or less likely? The answer is less likely. So the hormones you release when you're fasting are hormones that make you stronger, faster, and more alert so you can catch the next animal, right? And it's counterintuitive. If you fast for a day after never fasting in your life and you're headachy and tired, fatigued, and you can't think straight and you have brain fog, that's your body just revolting against, you've been feeding it multiple times a day, every day of your life. But if enough time passes, you'll kick in those opposite hormones to insulin that will help you preserve muscle, increase your mental clarity, give you more energy. And that's what everybody experiences. The hardest day of a multi-day fast is the first day. The easiest day is the last day.
Right.
Anyone who's done a 3, 5, 7, 10 or longer fast knows this. And it's a wonderful thing to experience, and we all should experience it.
And I know you have. I know you've done the multi-day fast.
Yeah.
I have never done the multi-day fast.
But it preserves muscle, which again makes logical sense, right?
But because of the growth hormone. So you're applying.
No. Okay, so no, perfect. So growth hormone dramatically increases. Why? Because when you do catch the next animal, you need to rebuild. So all the tissue that did break down, that 70 grams of protein you didn't replace during the multi-day fast, you're gonna take that growth hormone and you're gonna manufacture all the tissues that you need.
Does that growth hormone also help preserve lean body mass?
Well,
or no?
When we release body fat, we take the fat and we take the fatty acids and we convert it into ketones. Ketones signal muscle preservation. Muscle preservation. So there are many kinds of proteins in the body, and we will break down a bunch during fasting. Muscle is the last thing that will break down. And we know this in cancer research. The reason cancer kills you is because of what happens at the end. It's called cachexia. Cachexia is, again, you see the person with stage 4 cancer right before they die, they are tiny. All of their tissue has wasted. That is a rapid breakdown of muscle, and that leads to death. So muscle is your most important, right? It's your skeleton. It's your armor. Mm-hmm. It's what makes it possible for you to get more food and have strength and have stability and not be frail. So muscle is the last thing, and you have to fast for a massive amount of time before the muscles start to waste, because muscle wasting will occur for two reasons. One is atrophy because of disuse.
Lack of use, right?
So that's being a couch potato. You're going to lose muscle. The other is going to be mobilizing the muscle to use for energy, which is something that happens last.
Right, right.
It happens last.
So you've already used your fat for energy. Now it's eating into your muscles,
Right.
and it's like very, very at the end. So we're not talking about within your 12 to 24-hour period of time that you're going to have muscle wasting.
Muscle is
most people
so
afraid of.
incredibly valuable to your survival that your body will do anything to preserve it, and it does.
Awesome. So, Dr. Steve, obviously we talked a lot about this is your world, today, and I want people to know that, because we're going to take deeper dives into this concept, as well as a lot of things that's kind of spawned off of this. Everybody's asking about it, and you have all the answers. But so that being said, I'm going to go through a kind of a rapid. These are some of the extra questions that I got this week, because we knew we were doing this. People were submitting them. I got the first one is if I heard intermittent fasting puts you in starvation mode. I think we hit that one pretty good today. So the second one, my trainer says I need protein every 3 hours.
Yeah, so that's a myth. You don't need protein every 3 hours. However, if you do want to build protein, if you want to add muscle to your body, you have to activate a process, a building process, genetically called mTOR. mTOR is a genetic switch that turns on, that gets you to manufacture proteins, both muscle, bone, enzymes, immune system, etc. And that's a nutrient sensing mechanism. So it's a switch. Genetically, you have to turn on that switch. mTOR is turned on when we have a minimum amount of protein in a given meal. So what we say is each meal should have a minimum amount of protein. Let's just say it's 35 grams. I think research shows it could be less, it could be more. I think for guys like us, 35 to 40 grams. For somebody who's a lot smaller than us, it might be 25 to 30 grams. But that allows you to break down the protein into amino acids. When you have a sufficient amount of amino acids, the genetic switch switches on, and you'll manufacture bone, you'll manufacture muscle. And if you're lifting weights, you'll manufacture more muscle, right? And you'll manufacture immune system. So we always say, when you fast, but when you eat well. It's not that you have to eat multiple times a day. However, if you're 55 years old, you're trying not to lose muscle, you'd like to add more, you want to lift weights and activate mTOR at least twice a day. Some people will do it 3 times a day. Well, then that goes back to the 3 meals a day. If you're metabolically healthy, you're insulin sensitive, you're not metabolically unhealthy and insulin resistant or pre-diabetic, you'll do well eating 3 meals a day. But if you're metabolically unhealthy, you want to reset, and time-restricted eating can be very helpful. But when you do eat, it has to be sufficient. So here's where people run into problems. If you're doing time-restricted eating, let's say 16 or 18 hours a day, and you're naturally losing your hunger because you're mobilizing fat and the brain is just not hungry, then you're more likely to protein restrict. You're not going to activate mTOR. You're not going to do as much rebuilding as you would like, and then you'll start to lose protein in the form of muscle if you're not active, if you're not engaged in resistance exercise. All right. If that happens, if you lose muscle, your metabolic rate will come down. Muscle is energy expensive, fat is not. So here's the thing that people will, here's the trap. The trap is, I took care of my problem. I'm not hungry anymore. I don't have to fight cravings. I don't have to push away from a table still hungry. And it feels good, and the scale comes down, but you're losing a lot of muscle and fat because you're not restoring your protein when you do eat. So I'm a big fan of time-restricted eating, as long as when you do eat during that 24-hour period, you're eating enough protein to avoid muscle loss.
Cool.
Because your metabolic rate will go down. If you lose muscle, well, there's less to maintain. And there's less storage capacity for the carbohydrates that you're eating. If you don't want to be a low-carb person, well, then you better build more muscle, because you'll have more room to store the carbohydrates. But if your muscle is getting smaller due to disuse and not activating mTOR, so let's just say you have a meal that only, you're not hungry, you kind of have some romaine lettuce and 20 grams of grilled chicken or something, that's not eating well. And that 20 grams may not be enough for you to kick on mTOR to use that protein for muscle building.
Right.
But if you get 35, 40, 50 grams of protein, and again, what I try to do is I try to get a gram of protein per pound of body weight, because I do lift weights, but I do it in a 6-hour window or an 8-hour window. So I'm benefiting from the time restriction, I'm releasing body fat for energy, and at the same time I'm getting enough protein more than once a day to activate mTOR to build muscle. That's my strategy, because I'm 55 and I don't want to get frail when I'm older.
Thank you. That's awesome. Second question here is, why won't my cortisol spike and make me gain weight?
Yeah, so cortisol, adrenaline, these are the hormones that do go up, that unlock the fat from your, and that is
I think cortisol gets a bad rap.
It does.
And I think that up till recently in our conversations, I've always given it the bad rap myself because of the inflammation, how it affects the body. But I noticed that you have a different perspective and you have a different respect for cortisol than most people. So bring that into that.
Yeah. So hormones, there's a lot of conversations to have centered around hormones. Cortisol is a hormone. It's a hormone that is not just about stress. It's a stress hormone, yes. It's a sleep hormone. It follows a 24-hour cycle. And it's a blood sugar hormone. So when you're not eating food, and the body does need some blood sugar, it'll use cortisol and adrenaline to manufacture sugar from your fat and put it into the bloodstream as needed through the liver. So the problems occur when there is stress in our lives and we release cortisol at times of the day we probably shouldn't, but releasing cortisol is a natural process for us to have a good sleep-wake cycle, for us to manufacture the sugar that we do need, and we need very, very little. If I took all of your blood and put it into a bucket on this table, it would be 5 liters of blood. It's a lot of blood. At any given time, 90 minutes after your last meal or longer, you should have a teaspoon of sugar in the entire bucket. It's not a lot of sugar. You can take fat. Fat is a, we always say, a glycerol backbone, 3 carbons with fatty acid chains hanging off of it. We take the fatty acid chains, we move it to make ketones, but the glycerol backbone, we manufacture sugar from it. And that teaspoon is all we need. Sugar is so important to you being alive. So I said there's a teaspoon of sugar in your 5 liters. If there was a half a teaspoon, you'd be unconscious. If it was a teaspoon and a half, you'd be diabetic.
Wow.
So we maintain that simple teaspoon, which is really all we need. So sugar is so important to life that we never have to eat it. We make it.
Wow.
And
wow.
Cortisol is a mechanism to do that.
Awesome. Thank you for that one.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Last one here for this rapid fire is going to be, I read that women shouldn't fast.
Yeah. So time-restricted eating is not fasting. And there are times of the month that you probably shouldn't fast. So
time-restricted intermittent fasting, or what we're calling time-restricted eating
within a
will not
24-hour
affect
cycle.
Women, is what you're saying in that statement.
Look, the average American probably eats more than 12 hours a day. We have nutritional surveys in our country that go back to the late 1800s. And based on and I haven't seen these, I haven't read these, but I've read medical journalists who've gone through a lot of this data. And they say that right up until 1970, 1975, the average American was fasting 14 hours a day. Okay? That's not fasting. You're not going to destroy anything not eating for 14 hours,
right,
especially if you're eating well. So again, protein and fat being what you have to be sufficient in. In other words, if you're going to fast for 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 hours and then eat like a rabbit, lettuce and carrots and a little bit of chicken, well then yes, you're not going to have the fat and the protein that you need to manufacture the hormones that we're talking about. But if you're eating well when you do eat in that 24-hour period, that's not fasting. If you do a multi-day fast, well then we can have some issues. And men and women, one of the things that fasting will do is lower the active thyroid hormone. But that's only when we're calorie restricted. So you want to be careful that when you eat well so that you're not, I say calorie restricted, protein restricted. If you're not getting enough protein, then you'll see your thyroid hormone, T3 in particular, go down as a way to lower your metabolic rate. Because again, what we said before, your metabolic rate will go down if you're depending on food for your energy. But if you're using your body fat for energy, it doesn't have to go down. So this is why we get great results in the first 3 months, first 6 months. If you have a long-term strategy and you're not getting enough protein, then you might see your metabolic rate go down. So getting sufficient protein when you do eat is paramount.
All right, well, we covered a lot today, and the thing is, we intend on going deeper in these dives, so we look forward to your comments. Send them to us, but we learned a couple things today. First, we learned a lot about generally fasting, time eating. We learned a lot about autophagy and a lot of the things that happen positively during that time where we're not eating. But in particular, we learned that it does not slow down our metabolism, and it will not contribute to muscle wasting. So if you have more questions on this, please send them to us. We're going to take deeper dives. It is kind of your world, right? And we're so blessed to be able to spend some time.
So real quick, what is your strategy? What do you do on a daily basis?
Basically, what I found, if I stop eating around 8:30 at night, I try to stop eating at 8, and then I give that 30-minute if I want to have my more Greek yogurt. Yeah. But then I'll pretty much won't eat till 1 o'clock the next day. I'll wake up in the morning. So at night, so what I find for myself, it also gives me opportunities to take certain of my supplements that I would take on an empty stomach. I take my NAC on an empty stomach. I take certain things. Also in the morning, when I'll wake up, I'll have black coffee. I might put a little, theanine in it or something for my brain. But I kind of play around on that empty stomach till I haven't eaten yet. And around 1 o'clock, I'll eat.
And we could go down a rabbit hole of all the little things. Is coffee good? Is it not good? Is it fasting? Is it not fast? That's all nuance, right?
And I tend to be someone who, like most of our audience, where I watched Dr. Berg, and I watched a lot of videos, and I kind of learned a lot of this terminology through internet, YouTube, and then bringing it to you. So we've kind of fine tuned it. But the benefits for me, for myself, for years, and I did Atkins back when Atkins in the 80s, and I've done them all: bodybuilding, training, working with athletes. Always been diet conscious, food conscious. As chiropractors in particular. So I have found that this has been for me, like the Holy Grail. It has actually gotten, for me personally, it has allowed me to keep my lean body mass exactly where I want it. I'm used to it. The only problem is, like, my wife and I used to love to go to breakfast. Yeah. So once in a while I might break if it's just because we want to go have a date together. Yeah. Because that's when we do that. But that being said, I don't miss breakfast, and actually a lot of times I have breakfast around 1 o'clock. I'll have my eggs. And
there's no shortage of research out there that says time restricted eating is good, time restricted eating is bad. Eating breakfast and lunch is better than eating lunch and dinner, or vice versa. Tons of research out there, and I believe, again, as a clinician, somebody who uses this for people who have brain-based disorders, metabolic dysfunction, even people who are struggling with cancer. I don't treat cancer, but I help people get healthy who have cancer. we use different strategies therapeutically, right? But most important when it comes to long-term strategies, because you can do anything for 3 months, right? If you get fast results, great, but chances are you'll reverse those results fast as well. But the long term,
No pun intended.
Yeah, I've been doing this since, I don't know, 2014, right? And it's just been a steady strategy for me that works. You have to discover what works for you.
Yep.
Right. So
and let us help you. So, that's why we're here. Ask questions. We're here to give as much information and debunk the internet stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because we're working with patients. I'm a student of yours in your Trusted Doctors program where we teach doctors blood work. So I love being the person in practical, but also now getting the academic perspective.
Yeah.
This has been great, Dr. Steve. Look forward to our next show. Any final words you want to say on fasting?
No. Just make sure you subscribe to our channel. Make sure you hit that notification to be aware of our next talk, because I think this channel is going to be a wealth of information for everybody.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.